Are you planning a hiking trip to Tasmania and need some inspiration for your reading list? Or maybe you are a local who is looking for some new books to add to your reading collection or your hiking library. Well, you're in luck because today I'm going to share with you my 5 favourite hiking books. And if you hang around to the end of the video, I've got a little surprise for you. I'm going to tell you what my all-time favourite Tasmanian hiking book is. You'll find out at the end of the video. Hi everyone, welcome back. My name is Mauser. I'm a lifelong Tasmanian hiker and avid bushwalker here in Tasmania, Australia. Tasmania is a place that is very close to my heart. I've lived here my whole life and I have been exploring the hiking and the trails all over the state for the last 30 years. Now, while I love travel, hiking and exploration, there's one thing I love just as much as hiking. It is a good book, it is a good read, and even a good reference guide to the area I'm going to visit. Now, it could be a local hike, it could be a hike up the road that I haven't really done. I could be travelling overseas, it could be just about anything. And over the years, I have built up quite a collection of books in my library, and in particular, Tasmanian hiking books. Now, these books aren't just about hiking, they're about Tasmanian photography, Tasmanian wilderness, Tasmanian flora and fauna, and all sorts of other things Tasmanian. And if there's one thing my friends know, it is that I love planning a good hiking trip. I do it a year out. So today we're going to go through my 5 favourite Tasmanian hiking guides. These are ones that I use to prepare for trips and plan my trips and just have a general flick through when I've got a bit of spare time. So let's get into it. And now we're going to go through my favourite books about Tasmanian hiking and what I use to plan my trips. Number 1, first cab off the rank, is one of my favourite Tassie hiking books. I've had it for a long time, and it is Southwest Tasmania by John Chapman. Now, this book was first published in 1978 by Chapman, and it covered the whole southwest region of Tasmania. That's basically anything south of the Lyell Highway, and it's pretty much no roads, nothing to get there. It is pure rugged wilderness. Any seasoned Tasmanian hiking veteran will know this guide like the back of their hand. They will probably have a copy of it on their bookshelf, and I clearly remember buying my first one, this very book here, back in the 1990s sometime. I bought it and I remember thinking it's quite expensive, but I forked out the $25 or whatever it was at the time and bought this book, and I loved having this book. I would take it on big walks with me, the whole book. I wouldn't photocopy notes. I would take the whole book with me. Crazy days, I know, taking a whole book, but I would take this with me and read through it while I was on the walk. I just loved having this book with me and flicking through and reading about other walks while I was on a walk. I would read about other walks that I could see from my campsite and fantasize about going to those one day. I even carried the book on my 26-day Southwest Epic back in the early 2000s. This whole thing came with me. Crazy back then, I know, but it was good to have on that walk. It made the whole trip and it's still in good nick. Over the years, other editions have been published. It's now up to the 6th edition, I think. That's the 6th edition, isn't it? Is that the 6th edition? Yeah, it's up to the 6th edition. It's released other ones over the years, and over the years I've just bought each one as it's come out because it really is, it's my go-to guide. Whenever I'm heading into the southwest somewhere, this is what I look at first. Southwest Tasmania, as you probably know from other videos if you've watched them, that it is one of my favourite places to go hiking in all of the world, and this book accompanies me, or part of it in the form of photocopies or scan notes, accompanies me on every walk. I don't leave home without it when I'm heading into Southwest Tasmania. I am yet to find a more comprehensive book on the Southwest. John Chapman has been there so many times. Not many people would have done these walks as many times as him, apart from maybe Dave Noble. Check his website out. But it is a comprehensive guide. It has got good notes, kilometre by kilometre sort of notes, or it's got prominent points along the way, marked by kilometres as you go through. It's got all the major walks in the southwest of Tassie. It's got profiles now these days for each track as well, so you can look at the elevations and that sort of thing, and the undulations along the walk. And now it even has colour photos. The old editions obviously had just black and white stuff in them, but it is overall, it is an amazing guide. I'm yet to find something about Southwest Tasmania that matches it. If you talk to any hiker down there, you'll hear them talking about Chapman. They're talking about this, they're talking about this book. So if you are planning a walk to Southwest Tasmania, if you're planning on exploring some of the trails down there, then your first point of call should be Southwest Tasmania by John Chapman. It is an essential part of planning any trip down there, obviously in addition to maps, other notes, talking to people, that sort of thing. But your first point of call should be Southwest Tasmania by John Chapman. My favourite place to hike, which is why I love this book, and it's number one on today's list. That is Southwest Tasmania. Next book on the list is one book which actually spans 3 sections or guides or parts, 3 books as a matter of fact, and that is called The Abels. Now, a quick disclaimer on the Abels. Since 2019, I have provided some support in the form of writing a few of the essays, providing photography and other support for these books. I have not and will not receive any monetary compensation for this. I've just done it because I've just loved the books over the years and I wanted to help out in some way for the new editions that were coming out. I provided my notes, photography and support just from my trips away as a Tasmanian and an avid hiker. And all of my opinions here expressed are my own. They're no one else's. They're not any of the other contributors, the editor or anyone else's. They are my opinions only. And yeah, just want to clear that up before we have a look at this fantastic book. Now, I hear you saying, Mauser, what is an Abel? What are the Abels? An Abel was a term coined by the creator of the books, Phill Wilkinson. He edits them all. He coined the term in the early 1990s. He defined an Abel as a peak in Tasmania over 1,100 metres high with a minimum drop on all sides of 150 metres before higher ground is reached. Now, after years of poring over maps and visiting the peaks, Phill, along with Nigel Richardson and a dedicated group of Tassie bushwalkers, wrote and compiled notes for each of these peaks listed, and the initial book, this one, was first published in 1994, along with this little guide listing the peaks and their heights and all that information. Now, the original book listed 155 peaks in Tasmania that fit the criteria, but since that time, Phill has discovered 3 others that fit the criteria, so now there are 158 Abels in total. Now, initially, Volume 1 was released, and that had the northern section of Tasmania, and the plan was for Volume 2 to follow, listing the rest of the peaks. Now, I bought this book around the same time as when I bought Southwest Tasmania, that one I just spoke about. I had a flick through it, thought that's a pretty good book, some good details about some peaks I've never heard of, but at the time I was just focused on Southwest Tasmania and doing as much walking down there as I could. So it sort of went to the side and just sort of sat there. And I would just flick through it occasionally, have a look at some of the peaks that I'd never heard of, didn't even know where they were, and I'd think, yeah, maybe one day I'll do some of them, but there's no way I'll ever do all the peaks in this book. It'd even come on the odd walk with me. I'd take that whole book again. I don't know what I was doing back then, taking all these books on walks. I must have just been way too fit or something, but I would take it along and flick through it on walks, have a good read, and it was just a good little reference source. Now, this would sit on my shelf over the years with my other books, Volume 1, and I'd look in there and I'd look at the map in the front with the Volume 1 up the top of the north of the state and the map showing Volume 2 to come down the south of the state, and I started to wonder if Volume 2 is ever going to come out. And I reckon lots of other hikers were thinking the same thing. Every sort of veteran bushwalker you knew had a copy of the Abels, and it'd sit there, Volume 1, and no one knew anything about Volume 2. So then in 2011, I'm just walking into my local bookstore one day, and wouldn't you know it, Volume 2 is sitting there on the shelf. Volume 2 of the Abels was out, bought it straight away. Volume 2 was a lot thicker, had lots more essays on things like geology, geomorphology, land surveying, mapping, that sort of thing. You know what I mean? It had info on fungi, wildlife, plants, all that sort of stuff. Really detailed book. And I continued to read this with Volume 1 and just sort of more as an easy read as opposed to planning walks. I just enjoyed reading the book. Just good information about my local state, my local island where I live. But around 5 years after buying the second volume, around 2016, I'd done all these big walks that I'd wanted to do. I'd done all the Southwest, I'd done all these walks. And I started looking to the Abels to get some inspiration and some ideas for some new walks. And then I started to think, well, I've done quite a few of these walks now, so maybe I can do all the Abels. And over the last few years, we've nearly got there. We've got a few left to go, but we're over 100 now and well on the way. It's been really enjoyable just going and doing some of the Abels into these remote regions of the state that I go to, and it's been a lot of fun. I've got a few left to go, but it's been a great journey so far, and there are quite a few Abels that I've actually been up on multiple occasions. And this book's been a great companion along the way. Often it just sits beside my bed and I'll flick through and read one of the essays at night time. And over the years, updates have been printed. So the second edition of Volume 1 came out not long after Volume 2's first edition was printed, and this one just had a lot more detail. It had a lot of colour, some new sort of maps in there, and a lot more of those general sort of essays about surveying or fungi or animals, that sort of thing. It just had a lot more detail and a nicer sort of presentation as well. Phill had done a really great job putting this one together. And then after that one, the third edition was released around the same time as this second edition of Volume 2. And as each edition's been released, it's got updated photos, really good photography in there now by some well-known Tasmanian photographers. And Volume 2, the original edition of that was quite thick, but in Volume 2, it's now split across 2 books because there is so much content in there. There is an awful lot of photos in there. There is extra information. There's some really good maps and 4-page sort of spreads and photos, and it's just a great book. It's great to read. I love having this there to flick through, look at all the places I've been, places I'm going to, and even my kids like to have a look through it occasionally too now. And there is so much information there. Now, often when we are out on hikes and bushwalks, we will find ourselves firing trivia questions at each other with information we have learned from the books. My mate Woolser, who you've seen on those other walks, he loves coming up with little trivia lists for us, and he'll ask them while we're out on the track. Gives us a way to pass the time while we're walking in the rain or in the mud. And as fate would have it, in 2019, I ended up coincidentally meeting Bill, the editor of these books, Bill Wilkinson, who has put his, passion and effort into these, in making these books. I got to know him and I contributed a little bit to the books, wrote some essays, took some photos, that sort of thing. And it's been such a pleasure to get to know Bill. He's a great guy, as well as other walkers who I've met through my journey in helping with the book, with the Abels. Absolutely no bias here, but these are absolutely fantastic books. They make a great gift for someone who, if you've got a person who's passionate about Tassie hiking and they're interested in the Abels, then that's a great present for them. Look, they are a great series of books. I love them. I've got them all now. I keep them on the bookshelf, and I know my mates and I, we're always talking about the Abels and the books and little bits and pieces from them, but good series of books. Now, before I move on to the next book, if you're enjoying the video, please take a moment just to hit that thumbs up down there, give it a like, give it a subscribe, hit that little bell button as well, and you'll get notified of when there is a new video. Now, let's have a look at book number 3. Number 3 on the list is a book called 100 Walks in Tasmania by Tyrone Thomas and Andrew Close. Now, this is a very popular guidebook, another one I remember from the 90s having it, and it is quite a comprehensive guide to 100 walks all over Tasmania, and it goes from both short day walks through to longer sort of multi-day walks as well. So it's a good, if you want a good all-in-one sort of guide to Tassie, this one's good. It also provides a bit of information on the landscapes, the geomorphology and stuff of the landscapes and the mountains, when the volcanoes made the stuff. I think that's what geomorphology is, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, it goes into that sort of information. It is a great little book. It's quite compact and it's easy to carry around with you in the car or somewhere if you're travelling around the state. And it's got 100 walks, funnily enough, all over Tassie, day walks, that sort of thing. Good little guide if you just want an all-in-one book and you're just a weekend warrior going out and doing little trips. That is what I would be going for. It's a great book, especially if you've got kids. It's just got lots of ideas for walks if you're at a loose end and you don't know which walk to do. It is a bit hard to come by these days, but a good alternative I have found is called Top Walks in Tasmania by Melanie Bell. It's from the same publisher as this book, and it may even just be this book with another cover on it. I don't know, but it is a good alternative to this if you can't find this book. And that brings us to book number 4 on the list. And number 4 is a great book again. It is called Tarkine Trails by Phill. And Tarkine Trails is a guidebook that takes you on a journey through one of Tasmania's most pristine and beautiful wilderness areas. Now, the book's not that old. It was first published in 2015, and it describes heaps of walks through the Tarkine region on the west coast and northwest of Tasmania. It has some great notes on the history of the area, as well as just general notes on anyone that's planning on travelling to the area. Now, I just discovered this book randomly in a bookstore one day. I had a flick through it and instantly fell in love with it. It detailed this region in Tasmania that I've not spent anywhere near enough time in. Now, while I've been there a couple of times, this book did accompany me on the trips that I have made there, and it's really good to have just in the car when you're driving along, and it's got some good sort of things to do while you're travelling around the region. And my advice would be, if you are travelling to the Tarkine region, the sort of upper west coast of Tasmania, the northwest of Tasmania, for anything more than a couple of days, get this book and take it, because it's going to give you lots of ideas and things and places you should see while you are there. It'll give you lots of options and ways to fill in your day. If you're just travelling around the region and you haven't done a lot of research, get this book before you go. And that is Tarkine Trails. Great book and the most comprehensive guide I have seen to that region of Tasmania. And now for our 5th and final book. That final book, what is it? I hear you ask, saying, what is it? What's that final book? Final book today is Day Walks of Tasmania by Chapman. So initially, he only really had the Southwest Tasmania book and Crowdle Mountain Lakes and Clare National Park book that I had. But in recent years, he's branched out and he's created this book with his wife Monica, Day Walks of Tasmania, in addition to 2 other Tasmanian books, Short Walks in Southern Tasmania and Short Walks in Northern Tasmania, in addition to their very extensive library of other books which are all available off their website. And one of the reasons I just love the Chapman guides, I'll call them, is just the way they are formatted these days. They've got a good little snapshot at the start of each walk with the stats, the essential stats of it, the distance, the elevation, that sort of thing. And then they've got kilometre by kilometre notes of the track as well as the profile of the elevation and undulations of the walk. And they're just in a nice format, easy to read and very detailed. The other thing I like about the books is the overall guide for each walk. It grades them on difficulty, time, general features, as well as which are the best seasons to attempt the walks, which is quite useful, especially in Tasmania. And I think if you are someone who is in Tasmania for a while and you're just travelling around the state and you're planning on doing a little bit of walking, this is a great guide to have with you along the way because it details walks all over the state. And again, I often keep this in my car when I'm on a trip around the state with the family, as it offers me a lot of options to look at if I'm at a loose end and I think, oh, we've got a few hours to kill, is there a walk nearby? And I think if you combine this with the 100 walks in Tasmania or the top walks in Tasmania, I think with those two, if you're travelling around Tasmania to do a lot of day walks, they are some good options to have up the sleeve. So that is 5 books. That's my 5 favourite Tasmanian hiking books. And I think all of these are, in their own way, excellent guides for planning a hike in Tasmania. Obviously, different regions, different books. Southwest Tasmania is by far the best guide for Southwest Tasmania, funnily enough. If you're looking for a challenge and you're starting to tick off some mountains, then the Abels is a great guide and good list of peaks in Tasmania, but it's also just a great reference guide just to read about Tasmania, about the wildlife, about the flora and fauna, about how the whole landscape formed. It is a good all-in-one book about the mountains of Tasmania, and it will provide a good all-round education about all things mountainous in Tasmania. The 100 Walks of Tasmania, that's just a great overall guide for walks all around Tasmania in all sorts of lengths, from few hours to a few days. Tarkine Trails is one of my all-time favourite sort of hiking books. It's just a really beautiful region of Tasmania. I need to get there and spend more time, but that book will be coming with me and I'm going to be reading that book a lot more when I'm planning those trips. And then you've got Day Walks in Tasmania, just a good overall guide. 50 walks in Tassie, good little guide to combine with that 100 walks in Tasmania. And as I promised at the start of the video, which is my favourite book? If I could pick one book to have, which would it be? Well, I'd have to pick 3 because it would be the Abels. I'd have to pick this. I love reading these books even before I became involved in the books. In no way am I involved in a big way. I just shoot some notes off occasionally to Bill and he may or may not use them, but I just love the books. I've got them lying around the house. I just flick through them all the time. My mates and I are always talking about peaks and notes in these books, and it's a great Tasmanian book. I think it's really good to have. If you're a Tasmanian and you like the bush and you like hiking, they're a great book to have there on the coffee table to flick through from time to time. So there you have it. That is my favourite Tassie hiking book. But I tell you what, Southwest Tasmania by John Chapman is a very close second. All of these books I'm just returning to all the time and flicking through them. I love them. If you like this video, then please comment below. Tell me what your favourite hiking book is. Any hiking book. Doesn't have to be about Tasmania, but let me know. I just love books. I love collecting them. I'd love to know what you think is a great book. Could be for anywhere in the world. I'm always looking out for new books. So I'd love to hear from you about what your favourites are. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Like the video below, hit subscribe, hit the bell, and I will see you on the next one. We're going to come back next time. I don't know what we're going to talk about yet. If you want to hear me talk about something, leave that in the comments below too. Would love to hear it. Would love some ideas. And until that one, I better go cook dinner because my kids are getting hungry. I will see you next time. Cheers. Over and out.